Welcome to Unforbidden Truth. I'm Andrew. On this week's episode, I'll be speaking with convicted murderer Tiffany Powell. Tiffany has 8 children, 5 of which she had with her ex-boyfriend, and the victim in this case, 69-year-old James Harris. On April 26, 2014, James Harris was beat to death by Tiffany's then-boyfriend, Paul Reed. A jury convicted Tiffany Powell of masterminding the murder of her ex-boyfriend. She was convicted of aggravated murder and sentenced to 30 years to life. Paul Reed was also convicted of the murder and was sentenced to 15 years to life. Here's my interview with Tiffany Powell. Where were you born?
I was born in Alliance, Ohio, a little town.
What was your first positive memory as a child?
My first positive memory was I used to have like a lot of animals. I used to like rehab them and that kind of thing. So they brought a lot of joy to my life since I didn't have like a sibling that was my age.
What was your first negative memory as a child?
Um, well, I lived with my mother, who was a good mother, but we lived in a house that was kind of it was like infested with roaches and stuff like that. So that was probably the worst. Gave me a little phobia, I got a little OCD because of it. So
Did you suffer any childhood abuse or trauma?
well, the deplorable house, but my mother, she never like put her hands on me. I never been raped. Um, I used to get jumped at school, by a lot of girls. Um, but I guess that probably would be the worst. I, I couldn't make friends, so I used to get jumped by about 9 girls, and they used to like have me in a circle and like kick me in a circle. And I used to have like these dogs, and they used to try and defend me, and they would beat the dogs, and then the dogs would run away, and they'd come back, and yeah. So I guess that probably was the worst.
What was your relationship like with your mother growing up?
Yeah, really close. Me and my mom were really close.
What was your behavior like growing up, starting as early as you can remember?
Very like passive aggressive. Always wanted to make friends, but really could like never have like somebody for myself as far as a loyal friend. It seemed they always had ulterior motives or um. So I mean, I just really didn't have anybody, so I really just had like animals, and it was kind of a strange childhood, but yeah. So
What was your behavior like in school, primarily your middle school and high school years?
I really got involved in like I was a head majorette for a long time, baton twirling, for maybe like 8 years or something like that. Um, and then I met someone when I was like 15, and he actually became my child's father. Um, so I had a baby at 16, but pretty much I stayed out of the way. I stayed out of trouble. Um, Except for getting jumped every now and then. That happened all the way up until I was about 17, something like that.
Did you engage in any criminal activity as a juvenile?
No, I no. So I was pretty much, I don't know, I was kind of sheltered and timid. I've just always been quiet, like you know. So
Let's talk about your ex-boyfriend and the father of 5 of your 8 children, James Harris, the victim in this case. When and how did you meet James?
well, I moved to Canton from Alliance, and me and my brother, we were actually by his house. He had a whole bunch of cars for sale. So it was a 1989 Lincoln Continental, and I was really interested in it. I was like 15, and I was going to be 16, and I guess it was for sale for $400 because there was a lot of electrical work that needed done to it. So that's how I met him. He told me that he didn't want to sell me the car, like with having electrical problems. But I told him, I said, it was just minor stuff like on the inside of the car. Everything on the outside worked, so I didn't care. I just really wanted the car. So that's how I met Jim Terrace. He had like a whole bunch of cars for sale. And then after that day, I went back. Went back home, and it was the very next day when he popped up at my door. He made like he wanted to talk about the car, but then he kind of veered off into other things. And at that time, he was a teacher, and he worked at a high school called St. Howard in Akron. And so he wanted to show me his school. So I went with him to his school, his classroom, and there was like this room in the back. And he said he had to go get some supplies or whatever. So I remember going back there with him, and I sat on the desk, and that's when he, tried to kiss me and whatnot. So I kind of, I really didn't know that it was going to basically be all about that. So I jumped down off the desk, and then we kind of just left. But he still kept coming to my house.
What was your first impression of him after meeting him?
Well, he was very smart, and um, after meeting him, after that day, I felt a little awkward, just thinking about where his mind might be with me, and then after meeting him, I heard all kinds of stories through the neighborhood, about that he had a wife and he had this family, and just stuff that uh ways he didn't treat them good. So I kind of got this image about him, you know what I mean? So I looked at him a little bit different, like I was a little bit more, scared, afraid of him a little bit. At first he was just all nice, and I just thought he was just like this perfect person. Until I heard these stories, but I had never really seen it myself, but it still was in the back of my mind.
How old were you when you first two had sexual intercourse?
I moved from the place I lived with my mother when I was 16. Um, we moved from there, and I didn't see Mr. Harris for about a year, and then we still lived in a bad environment. And I had these little kids, and these bugs and stuff that were like crawling on my kids and stuff. So I ended up staying on the outside of the apartment in a car. So that's when he came back, and I was 18 when he came. I was about to be 18 when he came back into my life. He saw that I was in a bad situation and offered to help me to get out of the car with my girls, and he got me a place, and nothing really happened sexually until one time I was standing outside of his place with the neighbor person was standing outside of the place too. He lived upstairs, and I could tell that Mr. Harris was upset. So we went inside of my house, and that was the first time he really like put his hands on me. He choked me, and that was the first time he kind of, I guess you could say, he forced himself on me. It was, it was that time. So, but I was about to be 18, or I might have been 18 at that time. So that was the first time.
How would you describe James as a person?
He was intelligent, very street smart. He was a hustler. He had 5 or 6 different hustles with cars, scrapping, selling houses, you know, selling crack cocaine. Um, and I mean, he was a good minister. I mean, as far as when he did his sermons and stuff, he preached, he preached really well, and he just, you know, he really had like two sides to him. I used to watch him preach, and he used to, say, well, you should be this way, you should be that way, and I used to just wish that, it was that way for us with him. Um, so, I mean, like I said, he's the smartest man I've ever met in my life, for real, but he had two sides to him. Um, So I guess that sums him up.
How would you describe your guys' relationship?
Well, throughout the years, well, in the beginning or whatever, I had tried, like when I got my Metropolitan, I had tried to get away from him, and I tried to use an excuse that he had a wife and a family, and that made him cling to me. You know what I'm saying? And then the next thing you know, a man named Adrian McNeil was banging on my door, saying that Mr. Harris had murdered his wife in order to be with me. I guess she was killed in a car accident by one of the people that Mr. Harris had employed for working on vehicles and stuff. So, um, you know, I kind of just was like scared to like be without him after that or say anything to him. So I just kind of just dealt with him. It was very abusive throughout the years. We had a lot of police reports, domestic violence convictions. What most of them were dropped down to disorderly conduct because he had a paid attorney. Um, so it was just, at a point in time, I lived with him for 10 years. I never owned a key. Um, I wasn't allowed to go anywhere. The kids wasn't allowed to go anywhere. It was really bad. The neighbors kept calling the police. Um, and I lost my kids a couple times due to domestic violence. One time, Children's Services, they said, "Well, go to domestic violence shelter, otherwise we're taking away the kids." And so I did that. And then when I did that, they said you violated the court order that says you're not supposed to take the children out of Mr. Harris's home. So what they did was give the kids right back to him, and then of course I had to go back. So over the years, he used these children in order for me to, be his puppet all these years. So um, that basically it was an unbelievable relationship, with a lot of mainly physical abuse.
James was a father of 8, 5 of which he had with you. How was his relationship with his children?
Well, I'm not. I wasn't the best mother staying in a situation like that. I tried to leave. I probably went to the domestic violence shelter like 3 times. But he was like abusive to the children, and a lot of the times I would try and like jump in the situation, like when he would like discipline the children, but sometimes it would just make it worse. You know what I'm saying? So I had to pick and choose, but at a point in time, I jumped in every time because the kids were asking me why I didn't, do something from the beginning or, coming between them and stuff like that. And I was just, I grew tired of it. So, um, the last situation I had with him was he was beating my child, and I came from the other room and saw him hitting her with a belt with a buckle in on the end of it, and he split her shoulder open, and she was like, "Mom, why didn't you help me?" But I ran in there as soon as I could, and that was when we started running from him, and we lived in a vehicle for about 4 years. We would settle down to a house, and then he would find us, and we just had to keep picking up and leaving. And we even went to Joliet, Illinois one time, and he filed for custody again. So that's I mean, he sometimes was good to the children, you know what I mean? And I know that, like, with his other children, once they got older, he treated them better. So I was just like, maybe I could just hold off until they got older, and then it won't be so bad. You know what I'm saying? So, I mean, they're all like educated, and his older children. He has another set of older children from his wife, and yeah, they're doing really really well. But I just I just had a big problem with what he was doing to mine. I just couldn't sit there and watch that. I couldn't. You know what I mean? That's my only value was to be a mom. So he was good with them sometimes.
Let's talk about Paul Reed, your boyfriend and co-defendant in this case. When and how did you meet Paul?
Well, I was actually sleeping in his parking lot in a SUV, and that's kind of how I met him. Well, actually, I seen him on the internet. Yeah, I started talking to him. He was on Facebook, and he told me where he lived at, and I was like, oh my gosh, this is where we park at almost every night because it was a secluded area, kind of like in the country. And he met me and my children, and he was just like, he said, you guys look like, you guys have been in this car for a while. And he was like, and I kind of told him the situation, and he invited us to come and live with him. I had 7 children at the time, and so me and my 7 children, we started staying with him until Mr. Harris found out where we lived again, and then we all had to pick up and leave. Except this time we took Paul with us, and my mother, she would go with us sometimes too. So yeah, it was a lot of people in an SUV for some years.
Let's talk April 26, 2014, the day James lost his life. Can you walk me through the events that led up to James's death and what followed the fact?
Um, I had snuck my 11-year-old a phone, and she was watching the 4 other toddlers. And he was like leaving every day, and she would text me like the stuff that he was doing, and then an incident had happened where I guess he pushed the youngest child against the coffee table. He always believed that the youngest child was Paul Reed's. I might add that too, because I met Paul when the baby was like a month old. Um, so he pushed her against the coffee table, and then when my daughter said that she kind of went unconscious. When she came to, he was just like, "Oh, baby, you fell." This and that, was trying to coach her. Took her to the hospital, and when she sent me that message, I was actually at my counselor's, Deborah Saley, at Renewed Domestic Violence Shelter, where I used to stay at, and I showed her. She called police, told the welfare. I told the welfare. I called the police. I told the police, you know what I'm saying, that these kids are being left alone. They was like, well, we can't just go break in the house. So I called an investigator. The investigator said, well, it's a bad area, and we'll get spotted out because everybody's looking for cops and stuff like that. So I called CPS. We had a private custody case going, so they wouldn't help me. So then I tried to call in anonymously, and they never went to check on the children, not one time. So I freaked out, and I was just like, okay, well, maybe I can just, since I had a history of domestic violence with him, maybe I can just get him arrested so the kids can get help. Whether the welfare takes them or maybe his daughters or something. But I just could not just sit there and let you know what I mean? So I thought about, okay, well, what if he gets arrested for a protection order since we had all this domestic violence, And I met a girl at the domestic violence shelter, and, when I was at the domestic violence shelter, she knew about the abuse too. I told her about the phone and showed her, images and stuff like that were in my phone. And she was like, well, let's get him arrested. So he ended up, you know what I mean, coming into my house. He wasn't supposed to come into my house. He's supposed to come into the garage. He ended up coming into my house with a gun at 10:30 at night. And mind you, Paul goes to work at 10 o'clock. And the first thing he says is, I knew what the deal was when I heard the street name. So I immediately pick up the phone, call police, and they started fighting over the gun. And the police told me to get away from the fight, and I did. And then it got real quiet. I didn't hear anybody fighting anymore. So I went back. I told the operator. She kept saying, "No, don't go down there." And I told her I had to go down there because I didn't hear anything. So I went downstairs, and that's when I seen Mr. Harris laying on the floor, and like Paul was, he kept repeating over and over again, "Please don't be dead. Please don't be dead." And Mr. Harris was like still like moving. So he had died. So mind blowing to me to know that somebody can kill somebody with their bare hands like that. I'm kind of upset with my co-defendant because how do you not know if somebody's life is slipping out of their body? You know what I'm saying? I don't know. I don't know. It's just a bad situation, and I have a little resentment towards him because of it.
You are arrested not even 24 hours later and charged with aggravated murder. How did you feel when you were in handcuffs?
It was devastating. Yeah, it was very devastating, because I had children and everything. And so I mean I didn't know how the system was going to run. So I was just kind of in shock, you know what I'm saying? So uh it was just all surreal to me, for real. I was just hoping that, I thought that there might be a little bit of justice in the system or whatever, and that everything, you know what I mean, would be sorted out, in due time, and I ended up sitting in there for 2 years.
Was the death penalty on the table at any point in time in either of your cases?
No, no, it wasn't. Yeah, I think the max was what I got, the 32. So I did a PSI, and I haven't had like a bad criminal history, or anything I ever had was something that was with Paul, my co-defendant. Um, but yeah, they maxed me out. So, but when like I said, when he went to trial, they couldn't prove, that there was any premeditation involved, So he uh he got 15. He went to trial before me. And I don't know if you know anything about like double jeopardy, or uh what they call estapel, but we have the same crime and the same evidence. So the time that they had given me, and given me this conviction that they gave me, or what I mean, this they fatally defectively indicted me on aggravated murder again. When he went to trial, they had re-indicted me based on what they couldn't get him convicted with, and they fatally defectively indicted me on the same exact thing, which was kind of like a conspiracy in order to get some more time out of me. So that's probably one of my biggest main errors that I have, is I have a double jeopardy, because uh, the prosecutor strategized in order to get like this false conviction on me. So, but yeah, I was maxed out though.
You're ultimately found guilty of aggravated murder and obstructing justice, receiving a 32 to life sentence. How did you feel when you were handed down your sentence, knowing you wouldn't be eligible for parole until the age of 63?
I mean, I felt horrible, but I didn't really know much about the law or whatever. I just thought that, through appeals, that I could possibly bring some things to light, and that, it wasn't over for me, especially with, me believing in God and everything. And I have 8 daughters, and there's, I always thought, I said, God didn't give me 8 daughters in order to be away from. So it was I kind of held on to my faith. So, I mean, I was a little upset and stuff like that, but I was actually, kind of carried through because of my faith, and I'm still staying strong because I believe that, that I'll probably receive justice soon. So it's hard. I ain't gonna lie. I miss my baby so much. That's the hardest part. I miss my children so much, and I know that they're asking for me, and they're with his family. So they got a lot of spite and resentment against me, and you know, um, there's no way I can see them because of that.
You've been incarcerated 7 years now. What do you do on a day to day basis to keep busy and pass the time?
I'm in all the church um, programs. I'm in praise dancing when the choir starts back up. I'm in Cairo. I work out, but mainly I spend my whole day in the church, in the chapel. So, and I started it off like that because I was like, the only person in this world is going to help me is God. You know what I'm saying? And so, I mean, I realized where my help came from, and you know, um, That's basically what I do. I wouldn't have it any other way though. There's nothing positive in here. I mean, these girls, they have girlfriends and they 2 for 1, and I just don't understand it. Like, if these girls just, and I've talked to girls that don't, I really truly believe that they've been inaccurately sentenced, or over sentenced, and they don't fight their case. You know what I mean? And I just don't understand how you could just sit here and take it like that. I mean, I guess it's not for me to understand, but it's just really, really sad. You know what I'm saying? Because there's a lot of mothers in here and broken people. So,
Looking back on the murder of James, what do you think you could have done differently to avoid this tragedy?
um, well, I, wow. I guess probably just letting things play out and maybe risking something happening to my youngest child that I had with him. I just couldn't fathom anything. I just couldn't fathom, her passing away or anything. It's just, uh, I was pregnant at the time when this crime happened. I was 8 months pregnant. So usually I would go back to him when he would get the kids or whatever. But I was pregnant by another person, and I was worried, about him potentially, maybe being upset with me because I was pregnant and something happening to that child. It's the only reason why I didn't go back. But for real, I probably should have taken a chance and just went back to him pregnant. And maybe I could have just been, in the physical presence and prevented things from happening, So I really never really thought about it like that. But yeah, I probably, even though I was pregnant, I probably should have just went back. I probably should have.
Before we conclude this interview, is there anything that you would like to talk about that we haven't covered yet?
Right now, I'm looking into my case. I'm finding different documentation. I'm fighting my case to the best of my knowledge. And I'm actually trying to seek any legal help that I can possibly get. I think my main thing is I probably need an investigator, since there was such a conspiracy on my trial court. I had a very unfair trial where I couldn't bring up. The trial didn't even really know that I had all this documentation of abuse, or that that he was abusive. The jury didn't even know that. I didn't have a battered women syndrome expert or anything, so they just try to make it as as one-sided. I mean, when I went up on the stand and tried to tell my side, if I even said anything remotely towards him being, me being in the domestic violence shelter or him being abusive, they said sidebar, and try to say that I was slandering the victim. But I just felt like they had this whole motive that I wanted custody when there was no way I could get custody with me doing a case plan. And I was just trying to fight for my life. So, but really, I really need like an investigator or any possible legal help if there's any out there. So I guess that's it.
That was my interview with Tiffany Powell. Thank you for listening.